homeschool issues. When I asked whether or not people were interested in the 3 stages of homeschool class, if I build it, would you come kind of thing, she wrote to me and basically said, I got overwhelmed with homeschool and quit when my son was in 5th grade. But if I had access to that back then, I might not have quit. And I asked her, do you mind giving me a brain dump of why you actually quit homeschool? I'm curious what happened. And then she sent me an email and I read it and I was like, this is gold, and other homeschool families need to hear this. Do you want to be interviewed and come on with me, or are you comfortable with me just sharing what you wrote in the email? And she goes, oh, please share it with people if it will help. So I am back on the seashore. If you've been following me this last week, we've been watching the tide be very low. Today is the exact opposite. This is a high tide. I can't even walk around this wall. If you look out here, this dock, wherever it is, I've been walking around it on the other side, but obviously that's not happening today. So I found this spot on the seawall where I'm actually just gonna place my phone so that I can chit chat with you. Let's see if I can get this going and position it in the right direction. So the point of sharing this is this mom in homeschool, number one, in the links below, the resources that I'm going to be talking about will be down there. The first one is the 3 stages of homeschool class that the overview video is up and ready, and the master class is available for you to either enroll or get on the wait list for it. She also talks about something called my homeschool success plan. I will link to that as well. It's just a simple printable to remind you to keep it simple, sweetheart. And she shared from a brain dump kind of perspective, why did she actually quit homeschool with her son? So again, her son was in 5th grade when she threw in the towel. And raise your hand and share in the comments if, as a homeschooler, you have ever felt like quitting. I say if you don't feel like quitting at least once a year, then maybe you're like, you've got magic superpowers. I don't know. We all want to quit at least once. For me, it happened the day that the kids almost hung the dog and the bathroom upstairs leaked. It was terrible. Anyway, so I asked her, why? What happened? And then I did the little caveat, please leave your spelling errors and typographical errors. It makes me feel better about humanity, as if I'm not the only person on the planet that makes mistakes. She said, so I'm going to read this and then kind of reflect on things as different thoughts come to mind. Wow, I hadn't thought about it so deeply. So here it goes. She said she truly believes in classical education. She tried to follow a well-trained mind outline, thinking history, if very important. And then she has a bullet list. Number 1, trying to find the recommended history resources in my library was time-consuming. So when you're following somebody else's plan and they give you a list of these are the resources that you need, these are the books that you need, it is time-consuming. And if you don't think ahead of time, what happens is that the day of the lesson comes and you don't have what you need and you end up not doing any school that day, and that really weighs on you over time. She said, number 2, this was discouraging, struggling to make history fun and engaging, finding a way to make writing engaging. She tried notebooking, but couldn't find an in-home demonstration that made the technique click for her. In 5th grade, this is part of the 3 stages of homeschooling that I share about in the link below. Follow that video because it really gives you an overview of the 3 basic stages of homeschool. That foundation stage where they're learning to read and know their numbers. The end stage where they have their launch path into their future, and this rainbow stage in between where learning should be all about creativity and fun. One of the rowing teams is launching. It's super cool. So here she is in 5th grade in this rainbow season when it should be about chasing curiosity and interest-led learning and following a curriculum. In my experience in the 25 years of homeschooling and coaching other families, when you're in that season and you're trying to do curriculum versus talent, project, passion-led type journey learning, the light starts to go out in your kids' eyes, and you start to get this frantic feeling as you're trying to make it fun enough to hold their attention. And so struggling to make history fun and engaging and writing engaging is a real challenge. And I have all kinds of tips and tricks that I help other homeschool families exercise and lean into. I call it secret sauce. But I can see that by following a curriculum that really led to some of the weight that caused her to step outside of homeschooling. Number 3, she said, is that she struggled getting away from the check the box of what should be covered or what she thought should be covered. When you're teaching to a curriculum, the curriculum writers give you more material than you can teach in a day, and they typically do it from all these different perspectives because they're trying to touch all the different learning styles. The beauty of homeschool is that your child has a specific learning style. So if they're a visual learner, you don't need to do all the auditory, visual, kinesthetic, and project type learning activities. You can lean into the way that they learn best. That's a struggle if you haven't learned that lesson yet. Number 4, she did not engage in or participate in homeschool groups or outside homeschool learning groups. They were cost prohibitive because they didn't have, and she didn't have the mindset to get resourceful in finding funding solutions. And she didn't appreciate these as a resource coaching and thought the time used took away from learning time. So here she wrestled with and lost the battle that doing either coaching or enrichment activities, she got tripped up thinking that that was going to take away from education versus actually enriching education. And truly the magic is when the hands-on learning and interacting with different people in your community or different learning styles, there's real magic that happens there. So of course this adds to the overwhelm that can cause you to actually want to give up. Number 5, she did not train her mind to revisit tools or thoughts necessary to avoid burnout and keep things in perspective. She lists my homeschool success plan, and then she lists notes from a homeschool class that she took on how to avoid burnout. This is so important. There are online conferences going on right now. They actually run a couple times a year. There are classes and workshops that you can take from homeschoolers like me. And when you're sitting there and you're listening, you get these light bulb moments like, this is so good. And then it becomes like the trash compactor scene from Star Wars, where the world and expectations and people around you start to squeeze you in, and suddenly you're gasping for breath and trying to get away from that monster that's going to grab you by the leg and pull you under. So she, in reflection, recognizes that she didn't go back to the lessons to remind herself about why she's homeschooling and what kinds of things she can do to avoid burnout. Number 6, she did not plan out her year very well, topics and resources within the subjects, so she was last minute scrambling for materials. Oh, I relate to this so much. I almost asked my son this morning to hop on the video because here we are stuck on the island again. I say stuck, he's getting to row again, but I knew he wasn't in a mindset to pick his brain. When I think back on our homeschool journey, we did very little structured learning. There was so much rabbit trail chasing and so many last minute, I don't have everything that I need to do this, so what can we do? There was a lot of that. And I found freedom in that, and she found condemnation, self-condemnation, and frustration in that. And I want to encourage you that some of that is just simply a mindset that, hey, we have freedom in homeschooling to do what works, not only for our particular kids, not only for us, but for today, whatever's going to work today. My dad used to always say things like when we couldn't get something done in business, in life, as a family, he would say, today doesn't really matter you can do it tomorrow. What matters is that if you establish a pattern of never getting things done, never moving forward, never pushing past procrastination. Her number 7 said, personality-wise, she was not the dynamic, enticing, creative teacher that she wanted to be, and she found that discouraging. I want to speak to that. Most of us are not the Miss Frizzle of the Magic School Bus. We are busy moms and wives trying to hold it together, making sure the laundry gets folded and put away, that the babies get attended to, that a meal gets put on the table, trying to balance the budget when the money's going out faster than it's flowing in. These are real concerns that kind of squish in our joy. And when you add on to that this expectation that you need to be this magical, wonderful wizard of a teacher, those are unfair expectations for you to put on yourself. I made it a goal to be fun mom once a month. That's all it takes to establish an amazing trail of fun and adventure throughout childhood. Oh, you can ramp it up and say once a week or every other week, but really once a month, coming up with a field trip or a really cool project that you do together is enough to make it wonderful and special. So after she listed all of those things, she said the result was the thought of planning another year with a reluctant learner was soul killing for her. She was buried too deep in unmet expectations and too much burden that she had placed upon herself. And negativity was killing the relationship between her and her child, and it was the opposite of what she wanted. So here she had this homeschool year that wasn't flourishing. Her child is in 5th grade, which I have a thought about. And then the thought of trying to figure out what to do was just overwhelming. 12 is about the age of a 5th grade boy. It is the grade that all 5 of my kids were lucky to survive. I'm going to share a link to a blog post I wrote when my second child went through this wonderful age of 12. And it starts with something like, my son almost died today. And I'm not kidding. He did almost die by my hand because 12. It was terrible. But there's a way to look at a 12-year-old boy and to see it more clearly. And that blog post will show you what I learned and what I've shared with people, and it just makes so much sense. And you can share it with your sons specifically, but with your kids when they're getting ready to go through their hormones. So here she got to this place in her relationship that she realized that what she was doing with homeschool was sucking the joy out of the relationship with her child, and she made an executive decision. She's going to prioritize her relationship with her son over pursuing this adventure to homeschool. Now, it is only up to her to decide whether or not this was the best decision for her family, just like it's only up to you to decide what's best for you and your family. But this pivot point in something being really, really hard and it's starting to negatively impact your family has a pivot point. You have the opportunity to quit and do something new, or to lean in and to do something different. Do you hear the waves? A safety boat just went by. And then she said, if you have a few more minutes, she actually asked her 15-year-old son now. So a 5th grader is about 12. So here it is a few years later, and she asked her son what his take on homeschooling was. And he said he didn't like learning, so he was not happy about home being the same location as the thing he didn't like to do. Being home, being surrounded by other things that he'd rather do, caused him to really not engage with learning. And going to the library wasn't better for him. I love that insight that he was able to say. He probably couldn't articulate that what was happening was the way that he was being taught and the materials and that whole overwhelm and confusion was impacting and affecting that joy of learning. So what he was seeing was, ew, I don't like this, but I love being home and everything I love is here. And in his heart, he was like, push away the yuck and just lean into the good.
That was brilliant. He said, it was okay as a little kid because you don't know any different. But at the 4th, 5th grade level, you have other ideas of what you'd rather do. Pay attention to that. Have a thought about this. Definitely would have not been good in the middle school years. He acknowledges his schooling has him better equipped than the kids he's encountered with public school. Now I couldn't fully articulate the 3 stages of homeschool until even just a week ago, 2 weeks ago. This idea of the foundations and the launching into life, being in between, this delighting in learning, this love of learning. And what I've found, coaching other people specifically, but even with my own kids, that once kids leave the foundation stage, if you don't lean into what they love to do and then wrap academics around that, you lose them. Because it's right now at the time of this video, 2023. Everything they want to know is at their fingertips. My son and I were taking a ferry today, and it was really high tide, and the ferry in front of us was really high on the water, and you could see, what's that part of the boat called? I think it's called the keel. You could see the keel, and I said, I wonder how far that goes down. And he goes, oh, really far down. He goes, it actually goes in, and then it bubbles, and then goes down. And he goes, just another fun Stephen fact for the day. This kid leans into curiosity. He's like, I wonder why.